Welcome to the Babblery, working, parenting, playing, voting, advocating, and creating as women.
Yeah, it's the worst time to be named Karin.
What would it take to get you to go on stage and bare yourself to an audience of strangers? Not only that, but you'd have to make them laugh at you or with you. It's a little hard to tell sometimes.
Sucks being Karin. It used to be a noun, now I'm a verb.
Today on the Babblery, women on the comedy stage.
There are places where you must tell them your name. And, like Starbucks, which, okay, judge me. Yeah, judge me. No, I know you're doing it. You're not like,
This is your host, Suki Westling, and that was comedian Karin Babbitt. I know some of you listening are thinking, wow, I'd love to headline at a comedy club. But most of you are probably more like me, wondering what the heck makes someone want to do that. Of course, I have the fear that no one would laugh. That's basic. But I discovered something more in the course of this conversation. I had totally misunderstood the point of comedy. As an audience member, I get it. I'm there to laugh and hopefully to walk away with a sense of discovery. I expect a good comic to know more about human nature than I do, to have novel political insights, or at least make the pedestrian bits of life more bearable for another day.
Is that distasteful? So I go to Starbucks and I don't look too desperate, right?
But I realized that I had no clue about what the comic thinks her job is. When you go up on that stage, why are you there? What is the point of what you're doing? That's one of the things I learned in this wonderful conversation with two comedians, Karin Babbitt and Leah Rogers. There are other things that I learned, but you'll have to wait. It's all about timing, right?
This is Karin Babbitt doing a podcast with two of my faves, Suki Westling and Leah Rogers, doing one of my favorite things, talking to everybody about stuff. At the moment, I'm running a film studio, which is vocational in nature, and it trains developmentally disabled adults, all aspects of filmmaking. And then at nighttime, I'm a stand-up comic.
This is Leah Rogers. I am co-founder and a co-producer at Cooper Cogburn Presents. We produce comedy shows and we donate proceeds to different charities. By day, I'm a consultant and a mom, and by night, I definitely sling jokes in dive bars.
One of the things that women writers don't have to bring to work if they don't want to is their body.
In fact, I could alter my voice, and here I am podcasting as a man.
But women comics are up there in their bodies asking audiences to accept the whole package. Comics both have to fight against the assumptions people make associated with their body type, but they can also use it. Karin has returned to the stage as a mature woman with a new view of her younger self.
I have a lot of things to say about comedy and women's body. First of all, I was doing a lot of comedy in the 80s. I was at the Comedy Store every night and did a bit of TV, traveled around the country. And at that time, the pressure was that I had a certain appearance, which some said was attractive, and it didn't match being funny. And that created a lot of issues in my life. But now you hear so many women of a certain age complain about being invisible when they're older. And I'm having the time of my life with this aging androgyny. I'm just stoked. I have no concern, and I can't imagine people sexualizing me unless they're a fetishist, in which case I hope you're having a really good time. But I'm just enjoying the heck out of being up there and being non-specific. I had a man come up to me when I was much younger, and he said, "You have the you're as funny as a real comedian. I mean, a guy." And then he said, "Yeah, You have the kind of act that anybody could steal, which turned out being true. But I enjoy the heck out of it. And it's so funny that you mentioned body because I was a physical comic back then, and I'm still very much a physical comic. And there's a lot of warming up and maintenance that has to be done to be able to use the entire instrument. So, in a way, that is not genderized at all. Not to make light of anyone with a disability, but I think comedians really have a thing, something like Tourette's. It's a blurt that happens when you construct a joke, at least it happens for me, and a punchline bursts out and you just say it without consciousness, and you pay a lot of prices for it.
And here's Leah, who, like me, gets the C word a lot. And by that, I mean cute.
You know, I get told a lot that I'm cute. You're so cute. You're, you're 5 feet tall and you're just little and cute. And I think it, I have, I do, like Karin said, there is some mental gymnastics, like there is a I don't know. I have a system of getting into the mood where when I walk on stage, I'm not cute. I'm not even Leah Rogers, who married Mr. Rogers.
You did marry Mr. Rogers. Oh my goodness.
I married Mr. Rogers, and he is the nicest person in the world. And our world is very nice. And when I walk on stage, I am LJ. And that is a slightly I mean, it's all me, but I think that is the Tourette's that Karin talks about. That is this is coming out of my mouth and it's not going to be cute. And you're going to feel some kind of way about it. And that's not my business. I'm there to command the joke, the room, and to tell you this is funny. And I definitely have had people come up to me after a show and tell me that they didn't like something I said, or I had one lady tell me I was a really bad mom because I acted out a very dramatized version of me in the front seat of my first kid driving a car. And I was a lot of like, whoa, whoa, whoa. As far as how people, how I perceive myself, my whole life, I'm a 5 foot tall girl from a very big family and a very raised by a single Mexican mom. I thought I was a 6 foot tall dude.
Mhm.
I did not know I couldn't do things or shouldn't do things. So this is just my body. And yeah, I don't think of it like that, but I do know the response that I get is it's so cute and you talk melodically and you're very kind. And then I married Mr. Rogers and it's all very sweet.
Right, so our conversations nowadays, we revolve around things like, what's the difference between inbred and purebred? I was like,
It's probably not a coincidence that these two comics didn't have what you'd call typical gender role enforcement as children.
do we have to have this conversation on the way to a family reunion?
Here's Leah talking about her single mom who raised 10 kids.
I mean, I just think she was busy working 3 jobs, that she wasn't really there trying to force that on us. It was like, you do what has to be done. Simultaneously, yeah, the first time I rolled up to her house in a dress and wedge shoes, she's like, where's your slip and nylons? This is not appropriate. And I'm like, yeah, okay. I mean, she was widowed very young. She had 10 kids.
Oof.
And she worked a lot of jobs. And so she just wasn't there. So my role models were, I mean, honestly, my brothers. And so, like, I didn't have weird body issues because the message I got from them is, look how tough you are. Look what you can do. You can keep up with us. You're the fastest kid in school. Like, it wasn't, this is how you're supposed to look. It was, look how capable you are.
Inbred is you're making out with your cousin in a trailer park. Purebred, you're making out with your cousin, but she's the Queen of England.
Comedy comes from funny stuff that happens, of course. But one of the roles of comedy is to help us integrate the awful things that happen in life. Karin's parents were Holocaust survivors, something that has clearly influenced her outlook and her humor.
So it's kind of an intense story. What a surprise. But I was raised mostly by my mother and grandmother. My father got kicked out for going outside of the relationship, but he was always at work anyway. And so pretty much it was just a house of female gendered people, my mother, grandmother, sister, and I. And it was also very competitive in terms of beauty was a big commodity. I'll give you an example. When my mother had a heart attack, she called me up. I was living across the street. This is not too long ago, and I went running over there, and she was crumpled and gray and sweating on her bed. And I said to her, "Oh God, what can I do?" And I could hear the ambulance coming, and she started to whisper to me, and I thought she was going to say, I don't know, "I love you," or "It's buried in the yard," or something. And she says to me, "Bring me my eyebrow pencil." Because that was her survival thing. She was a prison camp survivor. She had been in Auschwitz for years, and her appearance was a lot of what saved her. And she used this appearance of hers to maintain a certain lifestyle in the Hollywood Hills. And my sister was always the one given the pink dress, and I was always given the blue. And I was given the blue tasks and the boyish things. And when I was in sixth grade, I got the Stingray bike, and I saved up blue chip stamps for the baseball mitt. And I just was always much more comfortable being that person. And I don't even think it was gendered necessarily. I was just a rough and tumbled human being. And there was never anything delicate. I mean, they tried, they put me in Russian ballet, for God's sake. Never made it. I was in that for 11 years, and I never got my toe shoes. I was just sort of this really sort of wild thing flailing around. Um, and so it's so interesting. When I was in high school, going to Fairfax High in LA, a friend of mine started this women's lib group. It had just started. It was like 1970 or something. And they were telling me to join it. And I was like, yeah, let's do this. And I had no idea why there were women's lib groups or why anyone needed one. I had no concept of roles. And I went to these meetings, and I was an angry person. So I tried to be angry too. And it wasn't until I went to college that I was like, oh, there is an awful lot of discrimination here. This is news.
Interesting. So it was for you not a process of feeling it as who you are in your body as a child, but rather seeing it from the outside, since you didn't view yourself that way.
Well, I do remember being very young and trying very, very hard to also be the girl in the pink dress, because that was the girl who got special treatment. But I never pulled it off. I was always the one, in the pink dress, yes, but it was ripped and I had bloody knees and a big scab on my arm from playing handball.
I wonder, it would just, well, I always wonder about things like this. We need to do a study of female comedians um, and find out, because what you're doing is, in a sense, sort of thumbing your nose at society in a number of ways, because of course that's what comedians do to a certain extent. But most male comedians are able to assume that the audience is with them,
Oh,
right? They're going to, right?
okay.
And then, but if you're up there as a female comedian, you can't necessarily make that assumption.
I don't think I present as that. I'm pretty sure I present as recognizably insane. And I think that's what people enjoy, like, oh yeah, I know her. Oh yeah, of course, she's the one who goes insane in the Department of Motor Vehicles. I've seen that person.
So you don't feel like they are looking at you when you first get up there as, oh, here's a woman comic. Oh, geez.
Maybe,
Maybe.
but that's none of my business.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you, Karin, I think for me, like I said, I can't be concerned about that. Otherwise, I think I would just freeze and curl up in the fetal position and never leave. It's like, oh, my job here is to tell you what's funny and why it's funny. And you can think whatever you want about me.
Yep.
But it's also my job to register why a joke didn't land. Right. So in comedy, it's the only profession in the world that we can get off stage and blame our failings on the customer. Like they were a dead audience. Like no surgeon is sitting there like he was dead when I got here, so I can't do But comedians, like you can, you'll hear them like, oh, it was a dead audience. I couldn't get them. Like, da 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 da. It's the only profession I think that they think that actually works. I'm a little more analytical about it. Like, why didn't that work? Like, where did I fail in commanding like why this is funny? So I can give you a quick example. I have 3 adult kids. They all played football in high school. I sat in those bleachers for 7 straight years, every game. And a mom I had been through it with all 7 years. I mean, numbers of years, not quite 7, but she didn't recognize me one day. And she was like, which kid belongs to you? And I point him out, and she kind of looks me up and down because I'm cute. And he's a giant. And she's like, stepmom?
Oh.
And I had that Tourette's thing, that flash of brilliance of like, oh my gosh, I can absolve myself of all my bad parenting mistakes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm the stepmom, I tell her.
Nice.
And she's like, I don't think I've ever seen his biological mom here. And I was like, she's a real piece of work. I was trying that joke on stage, but I wasn't able to bring the audience with me as I was threading that needle. They heard stepmom, and I'm saying the biological mom's a piece of work, not understanding I'm her. Same person. And they were turned off. Like they couldn't follow the thread of my insane thinking of like, haha, I get to be the fun stepmom and not the one sending him to therapy.
Okay, this is where I realized for real that I've been missing the point. Comedy is obviously really personal. The best comedians draw on their lives and draw us into their lives, but that's just the material. When we continue, Leah and Karin will help me deconstruct their process. But first, let's hear a little bit more about what it's like to be a Karin.
Not look too strung out, so I'm waiting in line, and I get to the front, and the guy's like, "May I help you?" All perky. And I know I want something that's kind of specific because I'm Jones and right, but I have to act all casual because I'm Karin, and I have to just say, "Oh yeah, I'll just have a house coffee, a little room for cream," and of course he's like, "Name please," and I'm like, "Karin," and he's like, "I'm sorry, I didn't hear that." No, Karin. Karin, my name is Karin. Oh! Karin wants her coffee. And then all the phones come out.
You're listening to The Babblery, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Babblery. We're speaking with comedians Leah Rogers and Karin Babbitt about comedy, being a woman in comedy, and why we laugh. And you may have noticed that before the break, I got nicely rebuked by my guests. It turns out I had no idea what the point of comedy is. And this is really awesome because I don't make these podcasts or write the articles I write to tell the world what I know.
They ask me things like, what's the difference between explaining something and mansplaining something? And that one, it took me a second, and I was like, well, explaining something is when you're talking to someone.
I do it because just like Karin talks about her almost uncontrollable need to blurt out jokes, I have an insatiable need to find out stuff I don't know.
And they're not attracted to you.
So given that I clearly have no idea what comedy is, I decided we needed to go back to basics. Leah will start by explaining what was wrong with her last joke, and Karin will explain to me, patiently, what a joke actually is.
I think there was too much dialogue. It wasn't like fast enough for me, like specifically how I explained that joke. It was, it needed to be faster, like, and cutting out a lot of the words. But in that moment, I was like, I get to reinvent myself as a mom. I'm the stepmom, right? I think that would have been, they would have gotten the point a lot more succinctly versus me trying to explain. I mean, even like why it was so weird this lady didn't recognize me. Like, it doesn't matter that she didn't recognize me. It was just a funny thing that some mom sitting there is like, you're like, how can you be a biological mom to that giant? I mean, that's a weird thing, but that's not the joke.
Yeah. So it starts with life, but then to become a joke, it has to be something else.
It has to be something else. And I think that thinking, that Tourette's of like, heck yeah, I'm the fun stepmom. No idea where that kid's real mom is. And then, oh man, that poor kid, he texted me, why does the football team keep asking me when I got a hot stepmom? And I was like, here's just a blank check for therapy and my apologies.
Okay, so a joke, there's some mechanisms that people employ, and I won't remember them all now because I feel under pressure. But one of them tools you use is exaggeration. Another tool that you use is identification. Another tool that you can use is the surprise ending, the reversal, the flip-flop of what someone expects. But then there are some of us who completely by accident and innately blurt in joke construction. It's just how we think and operate. Now, some people have the theory that that's just part of being a Jew. Jews are often represented, Jewish mothers or whatever that is, as somebody who just blurts the thing that's greatly exaggerated. Or there's a very famous, very off-color joke, which I'm going to tell and you'll probably edit out if you know it's good for you.
Apparently, I don't.
About David and Moishe are walking into the gas chamber. And David starts screaming, I don't want to die, I don't want to die. And Moishe says, shh, don't make trouble. Oh no, you're laughing. How could you? How could you? Anyway, so there's that whole piece to it. There's a cultural piece, yes, and there's a very mechanical piece.
So there have clearly been comedians who do comedy that doesn't come from anywhere deep. But Leah and Karin are doing the sort of comedy that draws on the hard stuff, what makes you angry or sad. Karin draws from her difficult childhood, even when she's not sure other people will find it funny.
Humor is a survival mechanism. which I'm sure you guys know. And when I was a kid, it was very, very dark, as you can imagine, in my home. And very often I was the subject or the recipient of a lot of rage and upset and disappointment. And I lived for the Ed Sullivan Show Sunday nights at 9 in Los Angeles, because when I saw the stand-up comics on that show, that was my first exposure to that. And I learned that by being funny, I could deflect, I could avoid, if I could just find the exact right thing to say. There's also a thing where when you're trying really hard to save your skin and you've learned that by being funny, you can deflect a terrible situation and derail it. This kind of almost subconscious connection is made where you're just scrambling for the technology of this thing that will save you. And when you land on it, it becomes kind of ingrained in you. And it just is the way that you respond to the world. And I now proudly say, and I know this is true, I have a OCD. And what it is I continually write punchlines in my head. Now, I can't tell you that I'm doing this, because you could be coming to me saying the most tragic thing, like, oh God, I had to put my dog down. And I'm thinking, down what, a flight of stairs? But I can't say that. I can't say that. But inside, I'm writing these terrible things
Uh-huh.
continually. And sometimes they just come out, and then I lose a friendship.
Karin went on to explain that holding back her blurts could help her be more authentic.
So Stanislavski had this theory about suppression, that the thing about good acting, he would call it method acting, is you make these decisions about what you suppress and what you show. And sometimes the battle of suppression gives more authenticity than actually just letting everything out. And I think it's no secret to the people with whom I have relationships and friendships that I am suppressing a lot. It looks like I have terrible gas, but I don't want to be lonely. My face is all red and I'm squirming and just trying not to say. And I think people understand that. I also think you have to have so much compassion sometimes that you just sort of put your, radio station sarcasm in the background. You let it be the white noise while you really, really intentionally focus compassion on the person you're with. And for God's sakes, don't let them catch you thinking what you're thinking. Eventually, when I get closer to people, I can admit that I write punchlines all the time, and then people will go, "Ha, you don't do that with me, do you?"
Really? See,
Ye-
I'd be so flattered if you told me that you were writing punchlines about me.
okay.
Okay, go for it. No, it's okay. But seriously, what you said is really interesting, because having experienced you as a teacher, I met Karin when she was my son's teacher, and I would say that you just described who you were as a teacher. This deep compassion,
Oh,
these funny bits, but never the funny bits that might have hurt. So the kids knew that you were freer in how you spoke than perhaps other teachers were. But they did not fear that you would hurt them. Though obviously you have a very, sharp wit, and you could have.
It's clear from what Leah says about her own childhood that her mom's absence was an important factor in her life. And now that she's a mom, it's clear that her relationship with her kids is deeply important to how she sees the world. But I wondered how Leah balances her need to make humor of her home life with her clear need to be a good mom as well.
So, I mean, I just think all kids, it doesn't matter, my home or anybody else's, are probably going to need therapy. But no, for me, I'm an introvert by nature, so I'm not actually a very chatty, like, we kind of joke that I am a socially inept introvert, and my husband is a socially inept extrovert.
Huh.
And so that was always going to make some weird kids. But we laugh a lot. Like, we have a lot of fun. They know I'm going to say what's on my mind. There are for sure things that need a little bit of time before they get discussed on stage. For a time, like, I don't really name names of who they are. So maybe if you were really in the room when stuff was going down, but with kids the same gender, and they're all kind of similar, like it's anyone's guess who I'm talking about. So there are some things, some stuff, like just recently, my son was like, there's no joking about this yet. I'll let you know when we can. And he's like, okay, go write it in your notebook. Because I think that feeling of like, oh man, I'm gonna lose it. It's just so good.
Wow.
For sure, I would say my in-laws struggle a little bit more with the comedy thing. And I'm not sure why exactly. I'm not sure, because it's stuff they joke about, but I don't know if they feel like I'm an outsider joking about it, even though I've been in their family for many, many decades.
Although Leah is now Mrs. Rogers, which sounds as white bread as can be, she is Mexican-American, and part of her life is dealing with the intolerance of immigrants that was heightened during the Trump administration. Leah tells a joke about how her mom swam to the U.S. Yeah, swam to the U.S., but it often falls flat with audiences who don't share her experiences and understanding of culture and geography.
With Trump talking about building a wall, people lost understanding of geography, and they were like, wait, why was she swimming? Like, what's happening? Like, there's a wall to cross, not like the Rio Grande to cross. It was weird. So that's why I had to retire, because Trump made us dumber. But for my mom, like, she was annoyed by that joke. I could joke to her, but me saying it on stage, she's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, no, the immigration's not here right now, Mom. It's fine.
But even Mrs. Rogers has some lines she won't cross.
So there is a little push and pull. I mean, the most I kind of joke about my husband is that he is Mr. Rogers, and he's very nice, and he's a very kind, and I mean, he like slap a sweater on that guy and yeah, he could be Fred. And so that's mine though. Like, I just kind of feel like my marriage is mine, and it's not really up for public consumption, I guess. And yeah, with friendships, I think I explain comedy because it seemed like such a bizarre twist for me to suddenly be on stage telling jokes. Like, I was the weird kid reading The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire and I said, it's not that I want to be up here telling jokes, but I feel like I need to be up here telling jokes. I need to connect with people in this way. And like, for me to say, hey, this experience was okay, and it's okay for you. And we can laugh about it. And no, really, we can laugh that my mom was an illegal immigrant. I can be my most authentic self when I'm on stage telling jokes.
There you go.
That is the realest and truest thought that I have. And even if it's an exaggeration, and even if it's not completely accurate, or there's a twist or a turn, like, that is how I'm seeing the world and how I'm connecting to it. And I hope you laugh too.
Wow.
I don't know if that's a good wow or which punchline did you just write, Karin?
Yeah, there you go. All right, Karin.
Ding, ding. Here comes the trolley. Hi, trolley. No, I just have a whole lot of respect for you. And I think this is what we have in common, that we are our authentic selves, even though I think we couldn't be more different. We are so the same.
Right.
Karin Babbitt literally wrote the book on Holocaust jokes, and that's no joke. When she tells those jokes, she bumps up against the conflict between being one's authentic self on stage and bringing parts of that self that the audience might not want to laugh about.
So years ago, I had a section in my act of Holocaust humor, and I was challenged by a writer from the LA Times to get up and do the humor. And I did it, and you could have heard a pin drop. I mean, nobody in the room would laugh at any of that stuff at that time. And this went night after night and really making the club owner angry, the famous Mitzi Shore, also a member of the tribe. And this man wrote up an article about this humor, and the LA Times refused to publish it. And so he boycotted his column for 2 weeks, talking about the very difficult things in your life. Sometimes that only works for the teller and it doesn't work for the audience. And so one needs to make a decision about, what is the function in me telling this thing? For instance, I have this joke that I have been saying, but I have to sort of tuck it in the middle of a lot of safe things. And the joke is, I'm the daughter of an Auschwitz survivor. And then the room gets very quiet. And I go, yeah, she had a number on her arm. And then it gets very, very quiet. And then I go, and I called it once. And then people start laughing. And then I say, and somebody answered. And then you pause. So, Suki, what would you say? Who answers nowadays?
Who answers? Oh my goodness. Um, for some reason, all I can think is, a pizza parlor, something
Oh,
really.
that's funny. Okay, I'm going to do that next time. Anyway, so what I usually say is, and somebody answered 1, 2, 3. It was Trump. Or sometimes I will say Kanye, you know, and people laugh at this thing. Finally, it's this release that allows them to be comfortable and also really enjoy that somebody's being irreverent.
Mhm.
And then whatever they go through, and then I have the opportunity to be exactly what Leah said, is just being out, that whole wonderful feeling of being able to just be out and not have this secret anymore.
Mhm.
So I wrote I wrote this book, as it were, and I'm very surprised that the Holocaust Museum has a link to it in their collections. It would have been nice to have gotten paid for it. But anyway.
This is why there are Karens. It's because you aren't willing to do it. Somebody has to Karen out. I make it better for the rest of you.
You've been listening to The Babblery and Women in Comedy. We'll be right back.
This is why when you're trying to get into my parking space, I have to jump out of my car and sit there in the parking space. I do it for you. All right?
Welcome back to The Babblery. We're speaking with comedians Leah Rogers and Karin Babbitt about comedy, being a woman in comedy, and why we laugh. We ended the last section on the topic of how comics approach the hard stuff, the life experiences that we might just want to sweep under the rug.
As I'm experiencing something really difficult, if I try to bring it up too soon, it usually is like a lead balloon and everybody is just like, oh. So we just had a comedian do our show, Alex Hooper, who the day before he did our show, he was given the all clear that they, after a year of cancer treatments, that they got it all. And yeah, it was incredible. And the organization that we were partnered with was the Women's Cancer Resource Center, and their entire goal is to make information equitable to people going through cancer. Um, and and so it was just this incredible feeling. And he's like, I just barely opened up about like a miscarriage, and people were crying in the audience, and I was like, I gotta keep going. And I think as comedians, we've all experienced that. Like, there's that human connection point where it's like, yeah, this isn't funny anymore. We're just talking like people. If it's too soon, if you're still working it through, it doesn't come out very clean. It doesn't come out very smart or very polished.
Okay, never mind. Yeah, so I'm incredibly old. You can cut my head off and just count the rings in there. There's 105 at this point. I don't even know.
But what about when comedy causes the hard stuff? Here's Karin on her experience as a young female comic when she was working to rise in the ranks at the same time as raising a critically ill child.
Well, the best known comedy competition, in fact, the original one, is the San Francisco International Comedy Competition. And in 1990, I bid for my second attempt to try to get into it. I was in the first one and lost the first round in 1980, but I tried again in 1990. And you have to understand that thousands of people sign up for this competition and submit to it. And out of that, 200 people are then considered for a field that eventually whittles down to 20 and then 10, and then you have 5. And eventually I made the top 5. And I was the only woman, of course, in the top 5. And I came in 4th. And the person who won, I wanna say he's very wonderful. He's deceased now, um, but I didn't do it. I didn't mean okay, see, there's a blurt. But anyway, he it was pretty much the more cartoon-like, the very clever, but very cartoon-like sort of presentation, the very specific presentation that was very identifiable, and they were very identifiable as types. And this was a situation where by being more generic, and yet because it was such a big international comedy competition having to present uber female, if you will, with the very tight pants
Mhm.
and the V-neck shirt, it felt very disingenuous. And the whole thing was done for me because I was having trouble breaking into headlining gigs in the San Francisco area the way that I was able to around the country and in Los Angeles. And I thought for sure that this was going to break the glass ceiling.
Mhm.
And at that time, I was on the Alex Bennett show quite often. I was a regular, and that was the big radio show that people listened to in the morning to hear the Bay Area comics. And it didn't work for me. All the rest of the fellas, the 4 fellas went on to these to Bay Area notoriety, and I was told that that would not be the case for me because the person who managed the second most prominent comedy club in the Bay Area, and when I talk about headlining, I'm not talking about ego, I'm talking about earning a living so
Mhm.
you don't have to do something else. And at that time, I had a critically ill baby, and I needed to be in the Bay Area. And I was told that I would not be headlined because I did not hang out. And what they mean by hang out is they mean do the drugs, do the drinking, perhaps have sex, or just be there till the sun comes up and then go home.
Mhm.
And as you can imagine, you cannot do that with a critically ill child. So here's a case where no matter what you do, no matter how hard you work, you're never going to be one of the good old boys because
Mhm.
you can't do what they do.
Karin eventually had to choose between comedy and the needs of her family and her own self. She left professional comedy to mother 2 children and work as a teacher, using her generous humor to improve the lives of others. But the stage called her, as it always has, and recently she followed the lead of other mature women who are proclaiming their right to be their authentic selves. You had a career that had some successes, and you talked about the glass ceiling, and you made a decision to step away. What is it like to come back to comedy after this time?
Oh, I almost wanna cry. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done because I had to start at ground zero all over again, and there's a lot of dues I paid for a lot of years to get to where I could have my name on the Comedy Store building, you know? Lots and lots and lots of nights at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning to 3 people that I'm trying to tell jokes to, and they're telling me, "Show us your tits." Pardon me, but that was the atmosphere.
Mhm.
And there's this woman who came back. She was gone for 10 years. Her name is Felicia Michaels. And this is a human being who does more for people who walked away and want to come back. She has a show at the Comedy Store called Age Against the Machine, where she welcomes people who want to revisit that time in their life and come back. And Felicia was telling me, go to a comedy class, start over. She was so supportive, and just the thought repulsed me. But I started going to the San Francisco Comedy College that is run by an old friend of mine, Curtis Matthews. I used to work there actually, and I bombed, like, for the first 2 years that I was going there, I embarrassed myself, I had this frenetic energy, but, you know, Suki, I wanted to rewrite this whole failure history that I was beating myself with. I told myself the lie that if I had just been something enough, I would have transcended it all, and I would have had this ultimate success, which is ludicrous because at the time when I was doing it, that wasn't available to women unless you were self-deprecating and Roseanne Barr and all that.
Mhm.
So I wanted to rewrite this failure story, Suki. I ended up being a high school teacher because I decided I was gonna give opportunity to people who didn't have anybody in their corner, who wanted someone in their corner. I was gonna give to somebody else what I didn't have. And then I realized, why am I embracing this failure story? Why don't I just try to do this thing? And I did, you know, and I exhausted my husband who drove me a lot of nights because I don't see well in the dark. And just as I was gonna give up, there's this woman named Priya Gayadeen, and she has this tour she threw together called Cougars of Comedy. And she has made this decision that she was going to create opportunity for women of a certain age to get up and have outrageous voices. And she asked me to join this tour. And even though I was embarrassed, and even though I felt like I was bombing, and even though I wanted to throw up when she would ask me, come on stage, be in this show, just the fact that she worked so hard and gave this opportunity was just what I needed to get over myself and just have some faith in myself that this is who I am. This is the authenticity. I have every right to return to it and be that person regardless of ageism. And thanks to Priya, I started doing well again. And these are still the people that still support me, that give me gigs in the Bay Area. And I'm not trying to get on TV again or be a household name or any of that stuff. I just want my right. In Santa Cruz, we have DNA, not just like deoxyribonucleic acid, but we have this incredible man who has singularly built this comedy community that is wildly successful here in Santa Cruz. And he now has all of these rooms that operate on a weekly basis. And it's fantastic. And people come from all over the Bay Area and they endanger their lives doing Highway 17 in the middle of the night to do these wonderful gigs because of who the people in Santa Cruz are, the way that they support laughter. And I guess it's these wonderful human beings that have created opportunity for women of a certain age to just stand up there and scream.
And do people listen? How do they react to women of a certain age? Do you feel like you're getting different reactions than you did when you were younger?
It's none of my business. It's just none of my business.
Yeah.
I
I
just
love
get
how
up.
you say that, because you can hear in my questions my self-consciousness, and in your responses you have defeated that, and that's wonderful. You as a comedian know what your job is, and audience be damned, what they are thinking is not anything you can control.
Exactly, and it in the '80s, it was absolutely what I was thinking about all of the time because I had this goal of this thing that I wanted to have happen that would make me happy, and that's no longer my goal anymore, and I don't need it to make me happy.
Yeah, so I don't do drugs. I don't know if anybody else here doesn't do drugs. I actually had 2 children without drugs. No, I'm just doing that because obviously I enjoy pain. That was the stupidest thing I ever did twice. Because they offered me drugs. They offered me good. No, serious. The nurse comes in like this. You having a baby? That's cool. Here's your drugs.
Like I said at the beginning of this episode, I approach comedy hoping to learn something. To laugh, certainly, but also to gain insight, and my interview with comedians Leah Rogers and Karin Babbitt didn't disappoint. I asked them why it's important for women to get up there, to share their experiences, and ask people to laugh, whether it's with them or at them. That, it turns out, doesn't matter at all.
And it was very uncomfortable.
Here's Leah.
And my husband was like, oh crap, I forgot to tell you. Our kids told everybody in church that you came home with chlamydia. Oh. Wasn't that kind of trip?
At the end of the day, it is you being your authentic self, and your authentic self matters, and your experiences matter. And finding joy and spreading joy is what changes the conversations. It does give people permission to laugh about some real shit things going on. And it gives people permission to be okay with not being okay. And I think that's regardless of a woman or a man or a they them, like it's you being authentically you and you being there to spread joy. And I think at the end of the day, if me being a real crap mom makes, a room full of people like, hey, I'm doing okay, then I did my job. If it made someone offended or upset, I felt like I did my job because you're thinking about it. And that is on the audience to recognize, why did this upset me? Let me figure this out. And it's on the comedians to just continue to be the voice of the people and your authentic self always.
I have a right. I have a right to get up and be exactly who I am. And I'd never had that right before because exactly who I am is a blurter and inappropriate and extremely emotional. And I was always getting sent to the principal's office and expelled. And I did a year in a foster home and all of these things. And when I'm a comedian, expected to, and I'm supposed to be all of those things. And it is my authentic place and my right. So it is my spot, me too. But beyond that, let's go under the assumption, and this is where I hate this, men are for Mars and women are for Venus. I want to just like punch somebody in the throat. But let's just say, okay, if society permits women to be more expressive of their emotions, and in my case, somebody who maybe can use their emotions to be manipulative, even though I feel more masculine, if you will, I can turn it on if it's going to get me that free Slurpee at 7-Eleven. Okay. Um, we have a responsibility right now to be that emotional person up in front of everyone because, as Leah said about being the voice, we're coming through, well, people like to say 3 years of abject terror. But I'm going to say that the day Trump was presumably elected, that November 8th, which happened to be my birthday,
Oh,
the incredible grief and terror. The fact that now there has to be commercials on television about put a blue square on your social media account to show people you're against anti-Semitism. The fact that there have to be billboards about anti-Semitism. The fact that there are people who will physically attack a person who presents Asian, right? That now more than ever before, we have a responsibility to be the voice and the emotions of authenticity. And that may sound like really grandiose for some punk broad in a comedy club somewhere underneath a bar in San Francisco, but I treat it as a public service.
Thank you very much.
Karin Babbitt, my sister, everybody.
visit babblery.com for links and information about this podcast. The Babblery is produced with support from KSQD in Santa Cruz, California.